Hello, there we go. All right, if we can start gathering, we'll get started in a minute or two. All right, folks, if you're coming into this class, come on down. All right, I think we'll get started. Looks like we're filling out a little bit. So we've been dealing with is we've been going through a series on the rapture, and we've kind of deviated just a hair to the Olivet Discourse. Reason I'm doing that is there's so many, if you will, pastors, seminaries, even some Bible prophecy teachers that many of us would endorse for the most part, that are misteaching the Olivet Discourse and applying it to the rapture. So the reason I'm spending some time on this is on occasion you'll hear somebody say they'll go to the Olivet Discourse, they'll pull something out and attempt to apply it to the church age. And just to be very clear, the Olivet Discourse was not written during the church age, nor does it have anything to do with the church age. Church age began after the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Christ, and Matthew 24 is certainly before the crucifixion took place. When Jesus was, and just a very, very quick review, when Jesus was talking to his disciples in Matthew 24, his disciples were asking him about when will the end of the age be? What will be the sign of your coming, if you will, to set up your kingdom? So they had nothing, they had no clue about what a rapture was back then. All they knew about was from the Old Testament, what would be coming when Jesus would come back to set up his earthly kingdom. So the questions that Jesus was being asked 100% had to deal with, when are you coming to set up your kingdom, is really what they're asking. The end of the age, which would be the end of the time of the Gentiles, which we touched on this morning, Luke 21:24. We currently live in the time of the Gentiles. In other words, the theocratic kingdom doesn't exist. The Jewish people are not dominant under the church age. After the rapture, the Jewish people will become dominant again after the rapture takes place. So again, everything that we're talking about in the Olivet Discourse has to do with that 7-year period known as the tribulation period. So we started last week, we got about halfway through what's known as the Abomination of Desolation. Let me ask you how you pull off the Abomination of Desolation during the church age if there's no temple. That's a strong poetic pause. When you try to apply Matthew chapter 24 to the church age, something's wrong. The third temple has to exist before this particular verse can come to pass. So this alone is a proof text that Matthew 24 does not apply to the church age, but it applies to the future 7-year tribulation period. So just as a very quick review here, the disciples basically asked Jesus 3 questions. He had just told them the second temple was going to be torn down. And they asked him, when is that going to take place? He did not answer it. And then what we are dealing with is the things he did answer. What shall be the sign of your coming? Well, they weren't talking again about the rapture. They were talking about when was he coming to set up his kingdom. And how do we know that? The next phrase, and of the end of the world. Basically, world is a bad translation. The word there should be age. The end of the world isn't until after the millennial time when the world is destroyed. So the Greek word there actually is much better translated age, the time of the Gentiles, which will not end until the end of the tribulation when Jesus Christ comes back. All right, we talked about the beginning of sorrows. So if I could call up Abby, my daughter-in-law right now, she could give us a first-hand account of what the beginning of sorrows are. Started about 11 o'clock last night. My wife got a text. I don't know, they didn't text me once. I'm very disappointed, but whatever. Anyway, they probably figure I wouldn't read it anyway, but about 11 o'clock, Abby or Trevor, my son, texts Valerie, says, we're headed to the hospital. And apparently, and I still don't know for sure, Valerie was saying it's a boy, and then she's saying it's a girl. I don't know what it is. It's what? You're sure? You're positive? All right. She's running around with a blue sign saying it's a boy. And then she's running around with a pink sign saying it's a girl. And I'm like, wait a second. This is an independent fundamental church. I'm like, it's one. We're going by Genesis 1 and 2. It's either a boy or a girl. It's not both. So apparently the final verdict, and I'll have to go examine the child myself this afternoon. But my understanding is it is a girl. And my other understanding is they were in no hurry to name the baby. They wanted to look at it first before they would name it. So I guess they'll name it Richard now. Anyway, but not. So if I find out what the name is, we'll let you know. But as of right now, officially, unofficially, it's a girl. I thought I taught my son and daughter-in-law better, but maybe not. So, but in all seriousness, I believe it is a young little baby girl, and we'll go check it out after Sunday school time. All right, but the beginning of sorrows actually, in all seriousness, does talk about the beginning of childbirth, or the pains of childbirth. The pains of labor as you prepare for something to come. Well, of course, what God is talking about when he's talking in the beginning of sorrows, he was talking about the tribulation time, what's going to be taking place, the sorrows that this world will be going through as it prepares for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords literally to come. So we're not going to go through all these, but just a reminder, these are the things in Matthew chapter 24, also reiterated in Revelation chapter 6, the sealed judgments of things that will be taking place during the 7-year tribulation period. Again, the big issue is every single thing you see on this screen are things that have been taking place for the past 2,000 years. But when we're talking about the tribulation time, we're talking about devastation. We're not talking about confined to a little piece here, a little piece there, a country here, a country there. We're talking about a worldwide catastrophic event. So after the rapture of the church, Antichrist will come on the scene. Well, talk about false Christ. Antichrist will be the largest, most visible false Christ on this earth. And if you go to Revelation 13, just rhetorically stating, Revelation 13, what does the Antichrist do? He literally takes over the world. One world government, one world religion, and one world economy. Speaking of which, off track for just a second, I'll be leaving Saturday. I didn't announce it in the church, but you guys can spread the word. I'm leaving Saturday. I'll be down in Dallas for the National Pre-Trib Research Council. I'm speaking there next week, not next week, but leaving Saturday to go speak there. Many of you knew of Tim LaHaye, Tommy Ice, and some of the best known prophecy teachers that most of you would know here. They started this group, 30, 40 years ago. There were probably about 400 or 500 people there, and it's just a great time of dispensational teaching. I'm going to be teaching on artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and the de-evolution of democracy. It's all centered around Revelation 13. So anyway, Pastor Josh will be here next week, and then I'll be back for the 15th, and we'll have our Christmas program. But anyway, false Christ. Antichrist will be the key player, and of course many others will be deceptive. Wars and rumors of wars, you're like, well, that's going on now. It's gone on for 2,000 years, folks, and it's going to continue to go on, but we're talking about massive, massive wars that will be taking place. Devastating famine, nation against nations, kingdoms against kingdom, pestilence, earthquakes, all part of these beginning of sorrows, persecution and martyrdom, false prophets, lawlessness. And the one positive thing is the gospel of the kingdom, basically the same gospel you and I know, but in preparation for the kingdom will be preached to every person. On occasion, a missionary will show up at a church, and I've heard him say it, And they use Matthew 24:14 for the church age. And I want to say naughty, naughty, but let them go. But it's an improper interpretation. The gospel is not going to be preached to every person during the church age. Could it be? Yes. But God promises that during the 7-year tribulation period, the gospel will be preached to every single person on earth. They have the 144,000 young male Jewish evangelists that'll be out there working. The 2 witnesses that'll be working. Many folks will come to Christ. And God said, listen, the entire world will hear the gospel during the tribulation time. So despite the horrible persecution and the death and the horrible things that will be taking place, the gospel will get out to everyone. Those are 9 signs that will be taking place during the beginning part of the 7-year tribulation period. Now we're going to Matthew 24:15, where we left off last week, and it talks about the abomination of desolation. In other words, what's going to take place. And again, just a couple of reminders with the pictures. Currently, there is no temple on the Temple Mount. The Jewish temple doesn't exist. It hasn't existed since AD 70. In other words, if this passage was meant for the church age, you got to have a temple. Well, the temple is not going to be built until after we're gone. You say, well, that's a pretty strong statement. How do you know that? 2,000 years of history to back it up. The second temple came down in AD 70. The next time the temple will be restored is Daniel 9:27. How do we get to the third temple so that we can get to Matthew 24:15? The Antichrist, I've got it up there, but I'm not sure where. So take your Bibles, go to Daniel 9:27 real quick, and it tells you exactly when the third temple has to go up. Shoo. I got to do it the hard way. I'm not used to using a hard copy. I use my computer all the time. But I read out of the hard copy. All right, Daniel chapter 9 again. It's a 70-week prophecy regarding the future of the Jewish people. Daniel 9:27 states, then he, speaking of the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant or a peace treaty with many, speaking of the Jewish people, for 1 week. Again, 1 week in the Hebrew here, it's a Hebrew heptad, meaning 7 of something, and we know it's 7 years. We know it's 7 years because the first 69 weeks all came to pass exactly as stated. We have historical documentation. The first week of Daniel's 70th week prophecy started in 445 BC when Artaxerxes made the decree that the Jewish people would leave Babylon and go back and rebuild the city and the streets. 445 BC. Now you take the exact date, you count forward 483 years, or 69 weeks times 7, and you come to the exact date when Christ was crucified. We have the historical data. We know it came to pass. So we know that every single week is equal to 7 years of the Hebrew heptad. So now in verse 27, 2 things had to happen before verse 27. The Messiah had to be cut off, which he has. The second temple had to be torn down, which it was. And then the next thing prophesied is the Antichrist confirms a covenant or a peace treaty with the Jews for how long? 1 week or 7 years. And here's the next operative statement. But in the middle of the week, or after 3.5 physical years, he shall, and they should not have capitalized he there, speaking of the Antichrist. So if you got a New King James Version, scratch out the capital H. It's wrong. Should be small h. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and oblation, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate. All right, what's he talking about? He's talking about in the middle of the 7-year period, the sacrifice and oblation is going to stop. Well, what do you have to have in order to have a sacrifice and oblation? You got to have a temple sitting on the Temple Mount. So in other words, in Daniel 9:27 cannot take place until the third temple is built. The third temple will not be built until the rapture of the church takes place. Why do I know that? Because the peace treaty that the Antichrist makes with the Jewish people is what is going to allow the third temple to be built. So it's got to be after we're gone. Antichrist steps up to the plate, gives Jews what they've been looking for the last 2,600 years, which is peace in Israel, which they're still looking for. The Antichrist gets them peace. The covenant is confirmed. The Jews build their third temple. And then what happens in the middle of it? The abomination of desolation, which we'll see in just a moment from Matthew chapter 24. All right, what's going to happen? The Antichrist confirms the covenant. We know that the temple is going to go up because the next part of the verse says he's going to stop the sacrifice and the oblation. In other words, the Jews get the sacrifice there 3.5 years. Things are going to be, the priests are there, the temple's built, things will be going along, lickety-split like the Old Testament Jewish law. Then all of a sudden the Antichrist says, stop, we're done. And he puts himself up to be God in the temple, which is what we're looking at now in the abomination of desolation. So in other words, the Muslim shrine, the Dome of the Rock, has to go away. Just for context, if you weren't here the last few weeks, when you exit the Temple Mount on the east side of the Temple Mount, you go down the Kidron Valley, and right across the street is the Mount of Olives. So it's all very close together. So I'm standing up on the Mount of Olives now, looking down into the Kidron Valley, and you can see the Temple Mount across the street there. So all very confined space-wise. All right, so very quickly again, we've looked at this several times, but rapture of the church will take place. The 7-year tribulation will kick in when the Antichrist confirms the covenant, the peace treaty with the Jewish people. Now what we're looking at, we've gone through, if you will, Matthew 24, verses 1 to 14, actually verses 1 to 13, we're looking at the first 3.5 years. Verse 14 covers the entire tribulation period when the gospel will be preached. Verse 15 then brings us back to the center of the tribulation period when the abomination of desolation will be taking place unequivocally. And we'll show you multiple verses to back that up in just a moment. All right, so what we're centered on now, we're in the middle of the tribulation period, looking at when this particular building, if it looks like that, which it very well may, that's an artist's rendition, of course, of what they believe the second temple looked like. There's a model of it at a museum in Israel. I've been to it multiple times. The model is about as big as our church, and it covers the entire city of Jerusalem. And the temple there is probably, it's about as high as our baptistry would be. But it's just an amazing piece of artwork that they put together, and you literally walk around it and can see that. So if you ever make it to Israel, it's there. All right, we already looked at Daniel 9:27. So what are the Jews looking for? They're looking at, and the Jewish people, the Orthodox Jews today, want the temple built. They want to restore the sacrificial system. And they can't do it now because, of course, the Muslims with the Dome of the Rock are causing interference. I told you last week, those that were here, the temple is ready to put up. Everything is made. I show you, dozens of pictures last time of all the temple vessels that have been built, put together. They're made. They're ready to put up on the temple. Rabbi Chaim Richman, who is the head of the Temple Institute, Orthodox Jew, said the second that we get permission, in other words, when the Muslims lose control of the Temple Mount, he said the first thing we're going to do, the altar is made, we'll bring the altar up onto the Temple Mount, we'll immediately begin sacrificing, and while the temple is being built. So, I mean, it's set and ready to go. Gershom Solomon from the Temple Faithful, who's dead now, but he put together a massive amount of things for the temple Institute, which we looked at last week. You can see it on YouTube or sermonaudio.com or our website. There's just a massive amount of things that have been done. I've had the privilege of seeing all these things. The 28,000 priests that run the temple, they know who they are. They got the names down for this generation. All the garments are made. They're ready to roll. So if the rapture happens today, and something's going to happen, folks, where that Dome of the Rock's going to come down, how it's going to happen, the Antichrist will jump into place, and the next thing you know, that temple will be up and running. All right, so the Jewish people will restore it. The temple sacrifices will be made until the abomination of desolation takes place, which is in the middle of the 3.5 years. So the last picture will show In today's modern scheme, if you will, the temple would be built. You can see the old city of Jerusalem and the new city of Jerusalem surrounding it. But that dome will be gone, and sitting in place will be the Jewish third temple. All right, again, we talked about there will be a war in heaven. What's going to happen? Satan's going to be cast out. He's coming down here. He knows that his time is short. Bible tells us that 3.5 years left, 42 months, time and half of times to finish his work on earth, trying to stop God's prophetic program. So again, there's war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon or Satan. The dragon fought and his angels, prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels, or the demonic world, were cast out with him. All right, so we talked last week, and this is where we left off, the satanic false trinity. You have Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. These three individuals, according to Revelation 13, are going to be running the world. In other words, it's no joke. When we talk about a one-world government, it's happening. It's going to happen. You talk about the one-world economy. We know about the world banks and all these things, the digital currency. All those things are being set up as we speak, and that will be implemented. And I missed one world government, one world religion. Oh yeah, there we go. One world religion. Anybody that doesn't worship the Antichrist will be killed. Revelation 13, 15, and 16 tell us that. So it's no joke. Over 50% of the world's population will be dead by this time, according to Revelation 6, 18, and 9, 18. 50% of the world's population will be gone. 4 billion people are dead, of it 8 billion, and many more will follow in death. Horrible, horrible time of tribulation. All right, so let's get down to some new material now. So the false trinity is set up, and now Satan's attack on Israel. The main thing that is going to trigger the abomination of desolation is Satan now, instead of being the Jewish people's best friend, now becomes their worst enemy. The worst persecution, the worst Holocaust of all time is now in place, starting at the midpoint of the tribulation period. So again, the Jewish people have had it. I mean, they've been happy. They will be happy at the temple. Things will be going good. They'll be able to practice their Jewish rites. But now it's going to come to a dramatic halt. All right. So we talked about the Antichrist coming on the scene. We looked at that last week, so I'm not going to reiterate it. What happens, though? They worship the dragon. The people worshiping Satan now. They're worshiping the Antichrist. So they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast, the Antichrist, and they worship the beast, saying, who's like the beast? Who's able to make war with him? So he's going to have tremendous power, tremendous charisma, tremendous ability to take over the world situation. Verse 5, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue. Now this is key. How long? 42 months. How long is that in year-wise? 3.5 years. Daniel 9:27, the last half of the 7-year tribulation. 3.5 years, 42 months, time and half times from prophecy. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. All right, so Satan's on a rampage. The Antichrist is on a rampage. The false prophet is on a rampage. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints. Now, we're not talking Christians. Now, I'm saying that word and pausing on purpose. Christians are part of the church age only by definition. So when we're talking about saints, you can be an Old Testament saint. You can be a saint during the tribulation. You can be a saint during the millennium. But the term Christian is no longer used. It's not used in prophecy. It was specific to the church age. So when we're talking about saints, we're talking about those not involved in the church age, but during the tribulation, the church is already where? Where's the church age saints? Up in heaven, all right, for that 7-year period. And all dwell upon the earth shall worship him, the Antichrist, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man has an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. All right, next section here. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. Who's this? Third member of the satanic trinity is the false prophet. Satan, Antichrist, false prophet. He exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. False prophet's job, just like the Holy Spirit's job, is to get people to worship Jesus Christ. The false prophet, the deceiver, will push people to worship the second member of the satanic trinity, which is the Antichrist. So again, everything is revolving around the satanic picture. And he does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He deceives those that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast. Now this is setting up for the abomination of desolation. Again, the defiling of the third temple. So the false prophet says, listen guys, I want you to make an image. And that image is going to be of the Antichrist. He's the one that we're to worship. He's the one that we're to adore. He's the one that will be our central focus. So they build whatever this image is to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and lived. In other words, the Antichrist appeared to have died, but he comes back to life, which is what causes everybody to worship him. Verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. And the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. All right. This image that we're talking about in Revelation 13 is going to match up with Matthew 24:15. It's also going to match up with Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, when we're talking about the abomination of desolation. The false image is going to be placed in the temple. It defiles the place. Matthew 24 gets very specific about it. This is the turning point from the tribulation to the great tribulation. This is when it gets unbelievably bad on this earth. It's been bad, and now it exponentially. We go from the baby birth pains, if you will, from the early contractions and the early pain, to where now it's hard labor, where this earth is literally going to be all but destroyed. Humanity is going to be all but destroyed in just horrible, horrible judgments that will be coming. All right. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the mark in the right hand or on their foreheads, and that no man may buy or sell save he had the mark of the beast. All right, so you got to worship the beast, one world religion. It involves all mankind. We have a one world government, and now we have a one world economy. You can't buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast. All right, let's go back to Matthew 24 now, verse 15. We've given you, and I know I'm talking fast, so you got to process fast. So we have, to slow it down just a hair, the rapture takes place, 3.5 years then of peace treaty with the Jewish people. The Antichrist comes on the scene. He has peace with the Jews. Go build your temple. I'm all for it. Build your temple. Get your sacrifices going. I'm all for you, folks. So the Antichrist is basically the defender of the Jewish people for the first 3.5 years. Then God says, listen, get Satan out of here. We're done with them. Kick all the demons out. They're not getting access anymore. And they get kicked down, and Satan is furious because he knows his time is short. 3.5 years, 42 months. So Satan then says, all right, I'm done playing with the Jewish people. Game on. We're going to wipe out all the Jewish people that we can. We're going to defile the Jewish temple, and I'm setting myself up as God. Understood? And that's where he goes from. All right, verse 15 back in Matthew 24. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by who? Daniel. Somebody showed me they had a Geneva Bible, and the word David is there instead of Daniel. I didn't know that was there, and showed me that last week. And the Geneva Bible, and I went and looked it up, made a little bit of a calculation error. So some of you may use the Geneva Bible. That particular word is mistranslated, but the word there should be Daniel. and I know very few use that particular version, but at least one or two here do. But the word Daniel is the proper word, and we showed you from Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 regarding that, about the abomination that will be taking place. So Matthew says, listen, 500 years later, after Daniel wrote his prophecy, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. All right, so now we're going into what is this, the specifics behind the abomination of desolation. Why is it such a big deal? Because, folks, this is the turning point in the trib. We're going from 3.5 years of the Jews being supported, Satan getting kicked out of heaven so he gets no more access to God. The demonic army, those that are left, are cast down, and now they're furious. They've got to stop God. You understand that Satan's whole plan since the beginning of time, back when Genesis, when we look at the creation of Adam and Eve, Satan has been fighting God since the creation of Adam and Eve. Why? Because the angelic world, only a few days, existed before humanity did. Lucifer wanted to be the head honcho. He wanted to be God. He wanted to have dominion over everything. When God created Adam and Eve, he said, no, not so, Mr. Lucifer, not so, Mr. what would become Satan, the devil, the old serpent of old. Adam and Eve are to have dominion over this world. Satan said, no, I don't like that. And I'm going to fight you tooth and nail. I'm going to try and stop Christ from being born. I'm going to try and kill the Christ child. I'm going to do everything I can to disrupt God's plan. The next thing he's going to do is the abomination of desolation, where the Jewish temple is defiled. Now, if we went back in history, Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 11 talks about an event that took place back in 164 BC, when the abomination took place by an individual known as Antiochus Epiphanes. 164 BC, he walked into the second temple, basically, and there's a couple of different stories that you get from it, but Josephus writes, basically he slaughtered a pig, took pig's broth and threw it on the Jewish altar, defiling the temple. The Maccabean War breaks out in a lot of history, which we're not going to get into today. The bottom line, it was a precursor of the abomination of desolation that will occur during the tribulation period. So again, Daniel 8, Daniel 11, Antiochus Epiphanes basically performed the first abomination in the Jewish temple, which led to an event that I'm going to talk about on Sunday school on the 15th. Anybody ever heard of Hanukkah? All right. The temple basically was defiled in 164 BC. Hanukkah was when the Jews regained control over the temple, and they went in. Supposedly had a one-day supply of olive oil, and it burned for how long? 8 days. So we'll talk about that, and we'll also go to the Bible that actually talks about it. When Jesus talks about the Festival of Lights, he's talking about Hanukkah, and we'll see that on the 15th. But don't have time to go there right now. All right. So we looked at Daniel 9:27, the abomination of desolation, and what do we have? The abomination is going to take place. And now Jesus is giving a strong admonition to the Jewish people that will be alive at that time. Hasn't happened yet. This is still future. The rapture hasn't happened. The Antichrist hasn't confirmed the covenant with the Jewish people. The temple hasn't been built yet. These are all prophetic. These are things to come. And now Matthew 24:15 says, listen, the temple is going to be defiled. Now, Jewish people, I want you to stand up and listen. You better listen, because if you don't, you're going to die. And it's no joke. So then he says, then let them which be in Judea. Where's Jerusalem? What region? Judea, Samaria, Galilee. Jerusalem is in Judea. The temple will be in Jerusalem, which is in Judea. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. What is God saying to the Jewish people? Folks, The Antichrist is coming in. He's taking over the temple. If you're in the temple, you better run for your life. If you're a Jew, you better run for your life because they're going to kill you. I mean, they're absolutely anybody that's Jewish, that isn't following the system of the day, that isn't following the Antichrist rule, they're going to die. Now we know again, and this is where we keep going back to Zechariah 13, these two verses you ought to have indelibly printed on your brain, Zechariah 13, 8 and 9. What percentage of the Jewish people are going to die now? What percentage? 2/3 of the Jewish people will die. 1/3 will be brought through the fire, through the tribulation. In other words, there's 15 million Jewish people today. If the numbers stay the same, that means 10 million Jews will die at this point. 10 million. How many died during the Holocaust? 6 million. The worst Holocaust of the world is yet to come. Guaranteed, Zechariah 13, 8, and 9. 1/3 will be saved. They'll be brought through the fire. Revelation 12 tells us that they will be protected in a place by God. So when we're looking at this, and this is where we get hung up on the problem with the tribulation period and the rapture. Right now it's pretty self-evident what's taking place. You got, the Antichrist is coming. Run for your life. Get out of here. Well, let's move on. And in fact, take your Bibles, because I don't think I have this slide up, and I've only got 3 minutes. Go to Matthew 25, or 24, I'm sorry, and let's see what happens. Let's start at verse 21. All right, Matthew 24, 21. For then, when this abomination of desolation is taking place, there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world, until this time, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh will be saved, but for the elect's sake, those will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes the west, so also will this coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. And by the way, the word eagle should be vulture. All right. Then what's going to happen? Immediately after the tribulation of those days, after the what? The tribulation of those days. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn when they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power, and glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. They will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. All right, and then he's going to go through several different parables. Go down to verse 36. Now here's where we're out of time. All right, I'm just going to explain it very quickly, and then we'll read it next time. Here's what happens. The parable is given in verse 36 and on. About two will be in the field, one will be left, one will be taken. You remember that one? All right. That is not the rapture. That is, we're talking about taken in judgment. What we just read. Get out of town or you're going to what? You're going to die. And the parable is going to be talking about people will be in the field, and all of a sudden the abomination takes place, and he's like, run, 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 or you're going to die. Two people will be in the field. Listen, if you don't go back, you're going to die. You're going to be killed in judgment. It's not about the rapture. He doesn't say we're going to take you up to heaven. You're going to meet Jesus in the air. Not there. No, one will be taken in judgment. Those who stay, those who didn't flee, as God told them to. 2/3 of the Jewish people won't go. They're going to die. All right? So we'll come back. I'm sorry, we ran out of time, which is nothing new. But that's the issue. So we're going to come back on that because that's the main rub, if you will, on rapture versus, if you will, the judgment. The people during the tribulation period, there's nothing good coming out of it. Nothing good is spoken about. Well, if you do this, God's going to bless you in a great way in the trib. No, the best thing that's going to happen is people will come to Christ, but in all likelihood they're going to be martyred. Some will be taken, some will be left. They're going to be persecuted. They're going to die in judgment. They're going to die in persecution. All right, I need 2 more hours, but we don't have it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pray. You're going to go home and have a great afternoon. I'm going to go see my new baby. Well, actually, my daughter-in-law's and son's baby, which I think is a girl. And we'll verify it tonight. If you can be here at 6 o'clock tonight, we'll be talking about the ark in Genesis chapter 6. So if you can be here, see you then. Father, thank you for your love for us. Thank you for these dear folks. We went through probably 10 hours of material in 30 minutes. So, Father, I pray that as we digest it, maybe listen to it a few more times, Lord, that these very precious promises of prophecy will begin to make sense to those that are already seasoned in the prophetic word. Just help us to be reinforced and looking forward to these great events that will indeed be taking place. Now, Father, we commit the rest of the day to you. Pray that you'd watch over us as we go our separate ways. And Lord, for those that can come back tonight for our study in Genesis, we look forward to that time. So, Father, we commit our day to you, our week to you. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for your grace in Jesus' name. Amen.